My name is Isabel, and I'm 39 years old. I spent months cooking gourmet dinners for my husband's mistress without realizing who she was. She adored my food, especially the dish she said tasted like love. What she didn't know was that the recipe came from her lover's wife. For most of my adult life, I believed I had it all: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a life filled with flavor, both literally and metaphorically. You see, I'm a culinary instructor. I teach people how to translate emotion into taste, how love can simmer in a slow stew, how forgiveness can rise with freshly baked bread, and how passion can sear in a hot skillet. Cooking for me isn't just a job, it's the heartbeat of who I am. For 12 years, I've been married to Landon. To everyone who knows us, we're the couple others want to be. He's confident, handsome, the kind of man who makes small talk with anyone and leaves them charmed. At dinner parties, and he always introduces me as the best chef in town, and I'd smile every time he said it. It made me proud to think he saw me that way. I didn't realize then that those words were slowly losing their truth. Our life was a series of cozy rituals, Sunday brunches, spontaneous wine nights, and soft jazz playing in the background as I tested new recipes. The kitchen was where we connected best. I'd cook, he'd taste, and between bites, he'd tell me about his dreams, expanding his business, traveling more, starting a family one day. It all sounded so beautiful, so secure. But recently, something had changed. It started small: missed dinners, longer work hours, the glow of his phone lighting up late at night when he thought I was asleep. When I'd ask, he'd smile and say, "Just work, Izzy." You know how demanding clients can be. I wanted to believe him. After all, this was the man who once drove across town in the pouring rain just to bring me my favorite takeout when I was sick. He wasn't capable of deceit, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. But love can make you blind in the cruelest way. I first noticed something off when I did the laundry one Saturday morning. There was a faint smudge of lipstick on his white collar, a shade of coral I'd never worn. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone hugged him at a meeting? Maybe it was just makeup transfer? Then came the perfume, faint but distinct, clinging to his jacket even after I washed it. And the phone calls, those quiet conversations in the hallway, his voice soft, tender, not like the way he spoke to clients. Every sign was there, like breadcrumbs leading me toward a truth I refused to see. I remember sitting in the kitchen one afternoon, staring at a pot of sauce simmering on the stove, realizing I'd stirred it for almost an hour without tasting. That's how distracted. My best friend Isla, a woman with a radar for nonsense, noticed something was wrong immediately. "You look tired," she said, sipping her coffee as she leaned across my counter. "Don't tell me Landon's still on those work dinners?" I laughed it off, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "You know how his job is. Clients, travel, meetings. It's just a busy season." She raised an eyebrow. "Isabel, I've seen that excuse before. Busy men don't suddenly start wearing cologne on weekends." I wanted to roll my eyes, but instead I just smiled faintly. "You're paranoid." "No," she said softly. "I've just been there." Her words stuck with me long after she left. I wanted to prove her wrong, to show her that my marriage was unshakable, but deep down, something was beginning to crumble. Still, I refused to let suspicion win. I decided that whatever was happening, I'd fix it the only way I knew how: through food. Cooking had always been our bridge. If I could just bring Landon back into our rhythm, remind him of what we'd built together, maybe we could find our way again. So when he came home one evening looking unusually cheerful, I thought maybe this was the moment we'd reconnect. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Izzy, I need a favor." I smiled. "Anything. What's up?" "I have a client flying in next week, someone important. I told her I'd host a small dinner at our place. I want her to feel comfortable." Her. The word hit me like an echo, but I pushed the thought away. "A client?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Yeah," he said quickly. "A potential investor, actually. She's really interested in what my company's doing. And, well, you know how I brag about your cooking." I thought it'd impress her. There was that pride again. The flattery that always softened me. I nodded. "Of course. What kind of menu are you thinking?" He looked relieved, almost too relieved. "Something classic. Your truffle pasta, maybe? She loves fine dining." I froze. You already know what she likes?" He laughed it off. "She mentioned it over lunch the other day. Don't overthink it, babe." And just like that, I let it go. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just doing what good businessmen do, entertaining clients, but something in his eyes that night unsettled me. There was a flicker, guilt maybe, or fear, quickly masked by a charming grin. Over the next few days, I poured my heart into preparing that dinner. I polished the silverware, folded linen napkins into perfect shapes, and spent hours perfecting every recipe. The house smelled of roasted garlic, lemon zest, and hope. I wanted this night to remind us both of what we once were. By the time the doorbell rang, I had just finished lighting the candles. Landon called from upstairs. "Can you get that? I'm just changing." I smoothed down my apron, adjusted my hair, and smiled. Whoever this client was, she was about to experience the warmth of our home and the love I'd built into every bite of that meal. When I opened the door, the smile froze on my lips. Standing there was a woman in her early 30s, elegant and radiant, her perfume delicate but familiar. She had a warmth about her, the kind that instantly put people at ease. She extended her hand and said, "You must be Isabel. I've heard so much about you." I shook her hand automatically, the sound of her voice ringing in my ears. "Welcome," I managed to say. "You must be the client." She smiled wider, her eyes glimmering with charm. "Yes, I'm Alina." And just like that, without knowing it, I welcomed my husband's mistress into my home. When I opened the door that night, Alina greeted me with a smile that could melt anyone's guard. She was striking, tall, graceful, and dressed in an elegant cream blouse paired with black trousers that looked expensive but effortless. Her perfume floated gently between us, something floral with a trace of amber, the kind of scent that lingered long after she passed. "Wow," she said, stepping inside. "Your home is beautiful. It feels so alive." Her compliment made me smile politely. "Thank you," I said, leading her toward the dining room. Cooking fills a house with more than just smell. It fills it with stories. She laughed softly. "Then this place must have 1,000 of them." Landon came down the stairs at that moment, his face lighting up a little too brightly. "Alina, you made it." He brushed past me to shake her hand, maybe a second longer than polite. That flicker of energy between them, it wasn't overt, but it wasn't nothing. I noticed it, tucked it away, and forced my lips into a smile. He introduced her. "Alina is a potential investor in our expansion. She's been a huge supporter of what we're doing." "Investor?" I repeated, extending my hand. "It's nice to meet you." Her grip was warm. "The pleasure's mine. Landon's told me so much about you, and your cooking. He said you could make cardboard taste like heaven." I laughed, though it sounded tight. Let's hope dinner tonight lives up to the hype. The dining room glowed under soft candlelight. The table was set with linen napkins, silver cutlery, and a bouquet of white lilies I'd chosen for their clean scent. I'd spent the entire afternoon making everything perfect. The centerpiece of the meal was my signature truffle pasta, the same dish I made on our anniversary every year. It wasn't just food. It was love folded into ribbons of handmade dough, every bite carrying the history of our marriage. As I served the plates, Alina leaned in, inhaling deeply. "Oh my God, that smells incredible." "It's a simple recipe," I said modestly. "Just patience and good ingredients." She smiled as she took her first bite, closing her eyes as if she were tasting a memory. Then she said it, the line that would echo in my head for weeks. "This feels oddly familiar," she murmured, like, "someone once made this just for me." Landon's fork froze midair. For a moment, no one spoke. I looked at him, but he quickly forced a chuckle. "Guess great food just feels like home, right?" Alina smiled, unaware, or pretending to be. "Exactly," she said softly. I glanced at Landon again. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight. When our eyes met, he looked away first. My instinct screamed that there was more here than business, but I silenced them. I told myself it was just my imagination. After all, suspicion could ruin a marriage faster than betrayal itself. We continued the meal with polite conversation. Alina talked about her company, her travels, her love for fine dining. She was confident, but not arrogant. Sharp but kind. A woman easy to like. Too easy. I watched Landon laugh with her, his eyes crinkling in that way that used to be mine alone. I caught subtle things. How he leaned slightly toward her when she spoke. How he refilled her glass before she could ask. How she said, "Thank you," in a tone that felt intimate. I excused myself to the kitchen to grab dessert. My hands were trembling as I plated the lemon tart. Through the doorway, I could see them, her hand brushing his wrist as she reached for her wine. His smile was nervous, hers steady. I took a slow breath. "It's nothing, Isabel. She's just a client. That's all." By the time I returned, I'd buried my discomfort beneath hospitality. We finished dinner with small talk and laughter, the kind that sounds full but feels empty. When Alina complimented the meal again, I thanked her genuinely. Despite my unease, I couldn't deny she was gracious, thoughtful, and kind. As she gathered her purse, she said, "This was wonderful, Isabel. You're incredibly talented." I smiled. "Thank you for coming. It was a pleasure." Before leaving, she turned to Landon. "Same time next week?" she teased lightly. He froze for half a second before recovering. Let's see what my schedule looks like." She winked, unaware, or pretending not to notice, the way my face stiffened. When the door closed behind her, the silence that followed was heavy. Landon started clearing plates, avoiding my eyes. "She's interesting," I said carefully. He nodded. "Yeah, she's sharp. Could really help the business." "Where did you two meet?" "At a networking event," he said quickly. "Why?" I shrugged. "Just curious. You seemed comfortable." He looked up, forcing a smile. "She's just a client, Izzy. Don't read into things." I studied his face, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the man I'd loved for 12 years wouldn't lie to me about something so simple. So I let it go, or at least pretended to. After he went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up in silence. The scent of truffles hung in the air, but instead of comfort, it made me sick. I sat down at the table, staring at the half-empty bottle of wine, wondering why something inside me felt so broken, even though nothing concrete had happened. Maybe it was the way she'd said, "This feels oddly familiar." Maybe it was the look on Landon's face when she said it, or maybe it was the intuition I'd spent years learning to ignore. I pushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself I was overreacting. Love demands trust, I told myself. I had to believe him. A few days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm, or at least the version of it we performed for the world. Landon left early for work, came home late, and I taught my classes, smiling through the growing weight in my chest. But one afternoon, while chopping herbs for a new lesson plan, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" I answered. A familiar voice replied, bright and warm. "Hi, Isabel. It's Alina. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Landon." I froze, knife midair. "Oh, sure. Hi, Alina. How are you?" "I'm great," she said cheerfully. "Listen, I can't stop thinking about that pasta you made last week. It was honestly the best I've ever had." I smiled faintly, trying to sound casual. "Thank you. That's kind of you." "Well," she continued, "I've been planning a few small dinners at my place, and I was wondering, would you ever consider cooking for me? Like, professionally?" Her words echoed in my ear. Cook for her? The woman my husband couldn't stop smiling at? I usually only do teaching, not catering," I stammered. "Oh, please think about it," she said sweetly. "You have such a gift, Isabel. No one cooks like you do." Her voice was sincere, too sincere. When I hung up, I stared at the phone in disbelief. There was a strange irony to it, a twist of fate I couldn't ignore. She wanted me to cook for her, my husband's client, the woman who made him light up in ways he hadn't for months, and I didn't know it yet, but that one phone call would become the invitation to the cruelest meal I would ever serve. When Alina first asked me to cook for her privately, I hesitated. Every instinct in my body screamed. There was something about her confidence, her effortless beauty, her familiarity with my husband, that unsettled me. But she was persuasive. She spoke with that kind of easy charm people are used to getting what they want. "I'll pay you double your teaching rate," she said over the phone, her voice warm, inviting. "Honestly, Isabel, it's not just about the food. I want someone who cooks with heart, like you do. You have a gift. Her words stroked my ego in all the right places, and for a brief moment, I let that ego override my discomfort. Maybe this was just business. Maybe it was a chance to expand my portfolio, meet people who could open doors for my career. When I mentioned it to Landon, he didn't even hesitate. That's great, he said, almost too quickly. It's a fantastic opportunity for exposure. She knows a lot of people with money, Izzy. This could be big for you. The way his face lit up made me pause. He wasn't surprised. If anything, he seemed relieved, as though he'd been hoping for this. Still, I agreed, against my gut, against that small whisper of doubt that told me something wasn't right. A few days later, I arrived at Alina's house for the first time. It was breathtaking. Modern architecture with soft feminine touches, white marble floors, wide glass windows that let the sunlight spill in, and subtle fragrances drifting from diffusers tucked into corners. Everything about the place was curated, designed to be both luxurious and comforting. "Come in," she said, greeting me in a soft silk robe, her hair tied up casually. "Make yourself at home in the kitchen." Her kitchen. I'd cooked in a lot of spaces over the years, restaurants, schools, homes, but this one was something else. The countertops gleamed, the appliances were top of the line, and the cabinets were stocked with imported ingredients that even I didn't usually splurge on. As I unpacked my knives and ingredients, she leaned against the counter, sipping from a glass of white wine. "You must think I'm crazy," she said playfully, "hiring someone just to cook for small dinners." I smiled politely. "Not at all. People find comfort in food. It's a love language." Her eyes softened. "You're so right." The first dinner went smoothly. She'd invited a few friends, polished, well-dressed people who laughed easily and complimented everything. They weren't just guests. They were an audience. Every time I served a new dish, Alina made a point to sing my praises. "Isn't this incredible? She just gets flavors." It was flattering, intoxicating even. She had a way of making people feel seen, understood, and though I tried not to, I liked her. But there was one thing that started to unsettle me. No matter what menu we planned, seafood, steak, fusion, she always asked for one specific dish, my truffle pasta. The first time I tried it, she told me, it just hit something deep inside, like a memory I couldn't quite place. "You don't mind, do you?" I didn't. But I noticed. As weeks passed, Alina began asking for more frequent events, sometimes intimate dinners for two, sometimes small gatherings with close friends. I'd cook, serve, and clean up quietly as she entertained. But every now and then, she'd linger in the kitchen while I worked, watching me like she was studying me. "You really love what you do," she said once, watching me knead dough. "I do," I said, smiling. "Food tells the truth when people can't." "That's beautiful," she murmured. "The man I'm seeing, he says something like that too." I looked up. "Oh?" "Yeah," she continued casually. "He loves food. Says good food. Is like love. You can't fake it. You either taste it or you don't." Something inside me twisted. Those exact words were Landon's. He'd said them to me the night we met, standing in a cramped student kitchen, making cheap pasta from scratch because we couldn't afford takeout. I laughed nervously, trying to mask my discomfort. "He sounds like a romantic," she smiled dreamily. "He is. Complicated, but romantic." Over the next few sessions, Alina grew more talkative. I became her quiet confidant, the invisible woman in the background as she sipped wine and vented about her life. She told me about her business, her ambitions, her heartbreaks. And then, one evening, her tone shifted. We were alone in the kitchen after her guests had left. She leaned on the counter, glass in hand, her voice soft. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "I'm in love," she whispered, almost to herself. "Madly in love, but it's complicated." My hands froze over the cutting board. "Oh?" I said carefully. "Complicated how?" She sighed, eyes distant. "He's married." My stomach lurched. "He keeps saying he'll leave her soon," she went on, "but I'm not sure he will. Still, I can't help it. He's everything I've ever wanted. He understands me like no one else." Her words blurred in my ears. I kept chopping mechanically, afraid my trembling hands would give me away. Then she laughed quietly. "You probably think I'm awful, huh?" I forced a smile. No, not at all. Love doesn't always make sense. She nodded. He said the same thing. That love is messy, but real love is worth the risk. My throat tightened. Landon had said those exact words to me once when we decided to move in together after just 3 months of dating. Every nerve in my body screamed what my heart didn't want to admit. I wiped my hands on a towel, turning away, so she wouldn't see the color drain from my face. What's he like? I asked, almost whispering. She smiled softly, lost in the thought of him. He's kind, intelligent, has this calm voice that makes you feel safe. He always smells like cedar wood, and when he talks about the things he loves, his eyes light up. He's passionate. A little secretive, but I like that about him. Cedarwood. Landon's cologne. Her words spun in my mind like a cruel melody I couldn't turn off. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh that cracked in the middle. Sounds like a lucky man. Alina's eyes met mine, sincere and aching. He says his wife doesn't appreciate him, she said softly, but I'm not sure I believe that. For a moment, the world stopped. The air between us was heavy with truth neither of us wanted to touch. I smiled faintly, masking the panic clawing inside me. Maybe she does, I said quietly. Maybe he just forgot how to notice. She nodded slowly, looking away. Maybe. I excused myself to wash. The dishes. My mind spinning. Every word, every gesture, every glance over the past few weeks now lined up perfectly like a cruel equation I could no longer ignore. The man Alina loved, the man she thought she was saving, the man she believed was trapped in a loveless marriage. It was my husband. That night, when I finally got home, I sat in the dark kitchen staring at the empty seat across from me, the one Landon used to fill with laughter and wine. I'd spent weeks feeding the woman who was feeding on my marriage, and she had no idea that the recipe she adored, the one she said felt familiar, was a dish I'd created for the man who'd made us both believe in love. I drove home in silence, the city lights passing like frames from an old movie, our movie, played back with some cruel director's sense of timing. Every scene of our life together rewound itself in my head. The first messy pasta we made in college, Landon teaching me to fold ravioli, the way he kissed the corner of my mouth when a dish finally came out right. Those small, intimate things felt suddenly distant, as if someone had been quietly editing me out of the film while I wasn't looking. When I walked into the kitchen, the house still smelled faintly of truffle from the night before. My hands trembled as I set the keys down, not sure whether to scrub the counters to calm my nerves or to collapse into the chair and let the truth pour out like hot water. Instead, I did the thing I always do when I don't want to think. I cooked. I made a pot of tea, measured the leaves with the same precision I used when I taught, and let the steam fog my glasses until the edges blurred and those sharp images softened. I didn't confront Landon that night. I couldn't. The idea of opening my mouth and turning everything into a shouting match, a confession, a brutal truth exposed in the fluorescent light of our hallway, none of it felt right. So I pretended. I kissed him goodnight when he came home late the next day, as if nothing happened. I asked about his meetings and nodded at his tired smiles, folding my suspicion into a neat domestic apron like it was just another fabric stitch in our marriage. But inside, I was doing what I do best. Taking inventory. I started documenting everything. It felt almost clinical, my professional instincts finding a new use. I screenshot messages, saved emails, kept the receipts from the evenings I catered at Alina's, and recorded voice notes after every time I left her apartment. I told myself I was collecting evidence, not because I wanted to punish him rashly, but because I needed to know the full story before acting. I had built my life on patience and precision. Revenge without a plan would only cheapen what was left of my dignity. I accepted more of her requests. Each time I said yes, a little part of me felt ridiculous, like an actor who'd agreed to play both roles in a play and was now forced to watch the other character flirt with her husband from the wings. But practicalities intruded. Alina paid well, far better than any private client I'd had, and I told myself this was business. Exposure, Landon had said. Networking. He had no idea I was making notes in the margins of our marriage. I began to schedule free tastings as a way to be close, to learn the rhythm of her life, and to be present when Landon appeared. I called them tastings, but they were reconnaissance dressed up in almond crust and beurre blanc. I learned the time he liked to arrive, usually just after the candles were lit and the music was low. I learned the way he would smile at her when she told a story, and the next morning, the way his face would look quieter when he came home to me. Sometimes, while I played at a starter, I would glance out the window and see Landon's car parked discreetly across the street. He always tried to be careful, slipping into the shadows like a man practicing an art he thought he'd perfected. I pretended not to notice, stacking plates with calm hands. Each time I caught that car, my stomach dropped, but I folded the feeling down and turned it into research. If a chef can take bitter herbs and balance them into something palatable, then I could turn hurt into strategy. Alina grew comfortable with me. She began to confide in a way that felt reckless and intimate. She would linger after guests left, swirling wine in her glass and telling me about the man who made her pulse quick and her breath shallow. She described him like a painting, broad strokes and careful detail, the way he twisted the corner of his napkin, the exact laugh that wrinkled his eyes, the scent of cedarwood he always wore. She spoke of late-night conversations, of promises whispered in a language spoken only between two people who thought the rest of the world was asleep. When she told me he said he felt trapped in a loveless marriage, my hands went cold. Those were not just any words. Those were the same words he had used, years ago, in a different context, complaining about some old relationship drama, a phrase he'd used once in a drunken confession that had sounded like a joke at the time. Hearing them now, uttered with such earnestness, was like finding a photograph of yourself in someone else's wallet. Reality started to assemble itself into a picture I didn't want to face. This wasn't an affair of fumbling mistakes or a single misguided night. This was a pattern. The more I listened, the more obvious the construction of it all became. Landon's discreet visits, Alina's praise for the food he loved, their talk of escape and new beginnings. I felt less like someone who had been betrayed and more like someone who had been slowly erased from a story whose pages she once helped write. Even so, I stayed composed. There is a certain economy to being calm when the world expects you to crash. I moved through my days with the same calm authority I brought to a classroom, full of students, measured tones, patient explanations, a steady hand. I taught my classes, posted recipes, answered emails. Behind that composed exterior, I was planning, meticulously, methodically, with the same care I put into balancing flavors. I promised myself I would not be reckless. This was not a scene from a late-night drama where everything is shouted into existence. This would be a careful course, layered and precise, served slowly. I thought about why I stayed. Part of it, I'm ashamed to say, was pride. I wanted to be the one who controlled the narrative. Another part was curiosity. Sick and strange as it sounds, I wanted to understand the man who could play us both. Mostly, though, I stayed because I needed the truth on my own terms. If I was going to walk away or strike back, I wanted to do it with a recipe in my hand and the evidence neatly wrapped in parchment beside me. And so I started to build the plan. Revenge, I decided, would not be loud, it would be quiet and indelible, like a reduction that thickens down until it's impossible to ignore. I sketched possibilities in the margins of my notebook. A public reveal? Too crude? Legal action? Premature. Instead, I thought of something simpler, more intimate, a meal, one that would ask the questions out loud when words failed. The first step had to be subtle, personal, irresistible. It would require trust, familiarity, the exact kind of warmth I'd been giving Alina all along. I needed her to let her guard down completely. I needed her to feel safe. That way, when the truth came, it would land sharper. I set the date quietly in my mind, watching how the pieces moved. I rehearsed the menu in my head, the way certain flavors coaxed stories out of people. And then, with my plan simmering like a pot on low heat, I did what felt most natural. I called Alina and invited her to dinner. I told Alina the invitation was simply to thank her for the work she'd brought me, for the flattering words, for the odd companionship that had bloomed in the most unlikely of places. I kept my voice light, the practiced hostess tone that could make strangers feel like old friends. In truth, the invitation felt like the hinge of a trap I'd been building slowly, each plan folded into place with the same care I used to fold pastry. I needed her comfortable. I needed her relaxed. I needed her to be unguarded. She arrived radiant, the kind of radiance that wasn't about makeup or wardrobe, but about calm certainty. She wore a soft silk dress with a muted floral print, and when she stepped across my threshold, she inhaled as if she'd come home. "Isabel," she said, eyes warm, "this smells incredible." It did. Rosemary and seared duck mingled with the faint, faithful trace of truffle that always seemed to follow me these days. I served the meal slowly, ceremoniously. First, an amuse-bouche, little spoons of compressed apple with a whisper of pecorino to wake the palate. Then the duck, crisp-skinned and lacquered in a reduction that caught the candlelight like a mirror. The carrots were caramelized until their edges sang, their sweetness balancing the rich meat. And of course, the truffle pasta, the dish that had threaded its way through the last few weeks like a silver seam, made its appearance, piled gently, and finished with a drizzle of brown butter and shaved truffles. She tasted everything the way she'd tasted me when I taught, deliberate, appreciative, like someone cataloging moments for later. "You outdid yourself," she said, voice genuine. "This feels like something I should have been served my whole life." We drank wine, red, deep, a vintage with weight, and the conversation at first skimmed along the surface. She complimented the table setting, asked after my students, laughed at a story about a kitchen disaster I'd had months ago. It felt ordinary, easy. The way she relaxed into my home convinced me my invitation had worked. She trusted me. After the main course, with dessert postponed to linger with our wine, I steered the conversation to him. It felt dangerous, like working with a live flame, but I kept my hand steady. "So," I said casually, "how's the mysterious man in your life? He sounds like quite the character." She laughed, a little breathless. "Mysterious? Hardly. He's brilliant and annoyingly self-satisfied at times." She paused, searching for the right words, her smile folding into something softer. "He's kind, Isabel, passionate. He always notices the little things. He sees people." Her eyes drifted off as if replaying him in her mind. "He's also married. He says he's trapped, that the marriage is over in spirit, but I don't know. I keep telling myself he'll figure it out soon." Each descriptor landed like a small blade. Kind, passionate, noticing the little things. I felt the air go thin in the room. I kept my movements measured, refilled her glass, offered more bread, like a professional who knows how to manage a crowd even when the set falls apart behind the curtains. "He mentioned your truffle pasta the other day," she continued, oblivious to the tremor under my calm. "Said it was the only thing he'd want to eat if everything else in the world disappeared." Her expression softened at the remembrance. "He said you don't cook for him anymore, that your life is so busy." She sounded almost apologetic for him, as if she wanted me to understand and forgive. My hand shook slightly when I reached for a napkin. There was a memory nested in that sentence, a dozen small moments where Landon and I traded smiles over a simmering pot, where he'd eaten in silence only to murmur later about how the flavor reminded him of something safe. I masked my reaction with a small laugh that belonged more to etiquette than to truth. "People say odd things after long days," I offered, tasting the lie on my tongue and swallowing. She shifted, closer, lowering her voice. "He told me once that he felt like no one notices him at home anymore, like the little things go unseen. He said he wasn't sure he could keep pretending everything was fine." Her vulnerability was naked and immediate. "I don't know if he'll do it," she said. "Leave, I mean. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he likes the comfortable part. But when we're together, it feels right." When she reached for her phone to show me something, a photograph, a silly selfie, she thumbed through images until she stopped on one of a delicate bracelet, sunlight catching the clasp. "He gave me this," she said, handing the phone toward me. "Said he picked it up thinking of someone who'd appreciate the little things." I recognized the bracelet instantly. It was the one he'd said was for a coworker's wife. Thin, silver, with a small, tasteful charm that caught the light like a memory. Seeing it there, so tenderly displayed, was like finding a private letter left on a public bench. My chest tightened, my hands went numb for a second. But I steadied them by pouring more wine into her glass, forcing my smile to stay even. "You're a good woman," she murmured suddenly, looking right at me. "You give so much. I can see why he loved that about you." The words were soft, but they landed hard. I wanted to tell her everything. The way he tucked a napkin into my collar once when I burned my chin on a pan. The time he drove for hours because I was homesick. But I swallowed those confessions like dry bread. Instead, I hugged her, because that's what people do when another human being reaches out in pain. Before she left, she pulled me close and whispered in my ear, "You're so lucky, Isabel. You remind me of his wife." The line was a poison disguised as flattery. I let the warmth of the hug fool her. I let it be a performance that would seed her confidence before the first move of my plan. After she left and the door clicked closed, I sat down at the kitchen island and stared at the pattern of light on the countertop. The house felt smaller, the rooms echoing with conversations that had always been ours. My hands found my laptop almost without thinking. Emotions churned. Grief, fury, a fierce animal clarity that narrowed everything to a single sharp focus. I opened a browser and hovered for a moment, feeling the peculiar thrill of crossing a line. Then I typed, slow and deliberate, into the search bar. I created an email first, something anonymous, neutral, then a social account under a gentle pseudonym, a name that sounded like someone harmless, Marin Hart. I chose a profile picture I found in a stock image library, an ordinary woman with kind eyes, smiling like a friend. My fingers moved with the same precision I used to plate a dish, decisively, without hesitation. The account filled out with a backstory that made sense, someone who understood relationships, someone who loved good food and bad romances. I set up an alternate phone number and a throwaway email, credentials folded away like receipts in my apron pocket. When I finally hit create, the screen blinked, and a new identity opened in front of me. It felt terrifying and exhilarating, like stepping into a room full of mirrors where you couldn't see your own reflection clearly. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself I needed a voice that could speak the truth without the tether of my own name. The first message I drafted was quiet, careful, an introduction disguised as curiosity. I wrote until my eyes stung, until the words felt as sharp and controlled as a well-honed knife. Then I paused, fingers hovering over send, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This was no longer only about catching him in a lie. It was about making sure the lie couldn't survive its own shadow. I hit send. The message went into the dark, and I waited, knowing that once the door was opened, there would be no closing it again. It's strange, the kind of clarity that comes with deception. The moment I created Marin Hart, my second self, the noise inside me went quiet. For weeks I'd lived with the constant buzz of humiliation and anger, but when I became her, this quiet woman on the other side of the screen, I found calm. She wasn't emotional, she was deliberate. Where Isabel flinched, Marin plotted. The first message was simple. He's not who you think he is. I sent it from the new account late one night, my heart hammering as the cursor blinked in the chat window. Then I waited. A few hours later, Alina replied. "Who is this?" I typed back slowly, deliberately. "Someone who knows the man you're seeing. Someone who's been where you are." I imagined her sitting in her perfect living room, phone in hand, the glow of the screen illuminating the faint doubt she'd been refusing to face. She didn't respond again that night, but the next morning I found a flood of messages waiting. "How do you know him? What do you want? Are you his wife?" I smiled at that one. No, Marin wasn't his wife. She was a ghost, an echo of the lies he'd told all of us. "Let's just say I believed his promises once too," I wrote. "He said he'd leave her. He said she didn't understand him. He said I was the only one who ever did." I hit send and stared at the words. They were all true. I didn't even have to make them up. That was the beauty of it. Every line of my revenge was stitched together from Landon's own script. I waited, counting the seconds until the message turned from sent to read. Then nothing, no reply. But the silence didn't bother me. I knew the seed had been planted. Over the next few days, I kept feeding her fragments, little pieces of him that only someone truly close would know. His way of tucking a napkin under his thumb when he was nervous. The phrase he used when he wanted to end an argument. "Let's not ruin a good night, okay?" The brand of cologne he wore. the song he played when he was deep in thought. Each detail was a breadcrumb, leading her deeper into the forest of doubt. By the fourth day, she caved. "Who are you?" she wrote. "Why are you doing this to me?" I replied, as Marin, the fabricated woman whose heartbreak mirrored my own. Because I thought he was mine. I thought I was special. Until I realized I was just another secret he wanted to keep. I added a screenshot, one of Landon's old messages to me, cropped and timed to look recent. "You make me feel like home again," it read. Alina's reply came within minutes. "He sent that to me last week." The irony was almost poetic. After that, everything began to crack. Alina's once bright messages turned brittle, her tone uncertain. She canceled one of our catering sessions, saying she wasn't feeling well. A few days later, she called me, not Marin, but Isabel, the real me. "I don't know what's happening," she said, her voice trembling. "He's acting different, distant. I think he's lying to me." I played the part perfectly. Concerned friend, sympathetic listener. "Are you sure?" I asked gently, swirling tea in my cup, my voice steady while my pulse raced. "I got this message," she whispered. "From someone. I don't know who. She said she's been with him, too." I made a small sound of surprise. "That's awful. What did you tell him?" "Nothing," she said. "Not yet. I don't know who to believe." I murmured soft reassurances, promising her that people make things up, that sometimes jealous exes look for attention. I said all the right words, the ones that would keep her talking, keep her unraveling while still trusting me. When the call ended, I set the phone down and closed my eyes. I should have felt guilt. Instead, I felt power, cold, clean, and sharp. Meanwhile, Landon began to crack too. He snapped at me over trivial things. The dishwasher, my phone left on the counter, a bill unpaid. His composure was slipping, his careful calm replaced by the twitch of paranoia. He could feel it, the invisible pressure closing in. "You seem off lately," I said one night, feigning concern. "Just work," he muttered, his jaw tight. "Long hours?" He nodded, not meeting my gaze. "Clients are stressing me out." I smiled faintly. "Maybe that investor woman?" He froze mid-sip of his drink, then gave a weak laugh. "You're funny." It was the first time I realized how easily lies could rot a person from the inside out. Days blurred into weeks, and my little digital performance continued. Alina kept reaching out to Marin, desperate for answers, needing to believe she wasn't the fool in someone else's love story. I told her partial truths, enough to twist the knife. He told me his wife didn't understand him either, that she was too focused on work, too cold. She replied, "He said the same about her, about Isabel." My fingers hovered over the keys, but I didn't respond to that one. Instead, I waited. It didn't take long. Within a week, she canceled all her dinner parties, told me she needed space, and stopped mentioning Landon altogether. But I knew she hadn't let go. Doubt doesn't disappear. It lingers, festering. And Landon? He was crumbling too. He started spending more nights at the office, but I noticed the difference. His clothes disheveled, his phone locked with a new passcode. He was trying to patch leaks in a boat already halfway sunk. The final act came almost on its own. One evening, Alina called me again. Her voice was fragile, the way a flame sounds before it goes out. "Isabel," she said softly, "I've been thinking. I need to do something for myself." I waited. "I want to learn to cook," she said. "That pasta you make, the one he loves so much." It took me a moment to respond. "You want to learn now?" "Yes," she said. "It feels like closure, you know. If I can make it myself, I won't need to think of him when I eat it." Closure. The word tasted ironic. I agreed instantly, my voice smooth. "Of course, come over tomorrow evening. I'll show you everything." When I hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, listening to the steady hum of the refrigerator. It was almost peaceful, the calm before a storm that I'd set in motion but could no longer control. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had created joy, now shaping destruction with the same precision. There was a faint tremor in them, a warning, or maybe anticipation. Tomorrow, she would come. We would cook side by side, and she would ask questions, still not realizing how deep the truth ran. And I would answer them all, except the one that mattered most. The one she didn't yet know she would ask. The next evening arrived slower than any before. I laid out the ingredients carefully: truffle oil, handmade pasta sheets, fresh herbs. The scent filled the air with memories and tension alike. As I heard her car pull up, I wiped my hands and straightened my apron. For a moment, I thought about what I was about to do, how a single conversation could dismantle every illusion left standing. Alina walked in smiling but subdued, carrying a bottle of wine. "For the teacher," she said softly. I smiled back. "For the student," I replied, taking the bottle and setting it aside. We began cooking together, moving in rhythm, the way two people do when they share something unspoken. And just as the sauce thickened on the stove, she paused, turned to me, and asked, "Who taught you that recipe?" The kitchen smelled the way it always did when I made the truffle pasta: rich, earthy, comforting. It was the scent of all my best memories, and now, the quiet herald of my reckoning. The butter hissed softly in the pan, herbs crackling as the heat released their oils. Alina stood beside me, stirring the sauce like a student concentrating on a test, her brow furrowed. In focus. Normally, she talked nonstop while we cooked. Stories, jokes, little compliments. But tonight was different. She was quieter, her smile subdued. The glow she usually carried with her had dimmed, and I could see faint shadows under her eyes. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. She turned to me after a long silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who taught you this recipe?" There it was. The question that had been circling for weeks, the one I knew would come eventually. I looked at her, my hands moving with steady purpose as I whisked the cream into the sauce. "Why do you ask?" I said lightly, pretending not to notice the tremor in her tone. "I don't know," she replied. "It just feels familiar, like I've had it before, a long time ago." I smiled faintly, tasting the sauce before answering. "That's because it's a recipe born from love. It's not about the ingredients. It's about who you make it for." She tilted her head, studying me, then pressed again. "But really, who taught you?" I set the whisk down, the metal clinking against the pan like a punctuation mark. The air seemed to thicken between us. "My husband did," I said softly. "It's his favorite." The world seemed to still. The only sound was the gentle bubbling of the sauce. Alina's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. "Landon?" she whispered, as if saying the name might summon him into the room. I nodded slowly. "Yes, Landon." She froze, her hand still clutching the wooden spoon, knuckles white. The color drained from her face until she looked almost ghostly under the kitchen lights. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The truth hung there, thick and undeniable, filling the silence like smoke. When she finally spoke again, her voice cracked. "He said, you couldn't cook." Her eyes glistened. "He said you'd lost your passion, that you didn't understand him anymore." I smiled then, not with joy, but with the calm of someone who has seen the full picture for the first time. I reached for the plate, spooned the pasta onto it, and slid it toward her. "Then taste it again," I said quietly. "Tell me if it tastes like a lie now." Her hand trembled as she lifted the fork. She hesitated, then took a bite. For a moment she chewed in silence, her throat tightening with each swallow. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She set the fork down with a soft clatter. "He told me you didn't make him feel anything," she whispered. "That the marriage was over. That you were just going through the motions." I leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. "He's a good storyteller," I said. "I should know. I believed his stories too." Her shoulders began to shake. "I didn't know, Isabel. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," I said honestly. "You weren't supposed to know. That's what makes it work, doesn't it? The secrecy. The thrill." She looked up at me, her mascara smudged, her voice shaking. "He told me he was lonely, that his wife didn't appreciate him. I thought I was saving him." "From what?" I asked softly. "A woman who loved him enough to feed him, to build his life, to give him everything he ever said he wanted." Her silence was answer enough. I walked around the counter, standing directly across from her. She didn't move, just sat there, small and broken, clutching the edge of the table as if it could anchor her. "You're not the villain here," I said gently. You're just the other half of the story he didn't have the courage to finish." The words seemed to both comfort and crush her at once. She let out a shaky breath and nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "If I'd known, I never would have—" I stopped her with a hand raised. "It doesn't matter now. You know the truth. That's enough." She shook her head slowly. "No, it's not. I need to talk to him." I could have stopped her. I could have told her not to bother. But part of me wanted her to confront him, to drag the lies into the light where they belonged. "Then you should," I said finally. "You deserve to hear whatever version he tells you next." She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she murmured, "for being kind. You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "You were part of a story I needed to end. Maybe we both were." We stood there for a moment, two women bound by the same betrayal, staring at the dish that had tied us together without our consent. When she left, she didn't look back. The door clicked shut, and the house fell into silence again. That night, I sat at the table alone, staring at the half-empty plate of pasta. The scent of truffle filled the air, mingling with the faint smell of Alina's perfume that lingered long after she'd gone. For a long while, I just sat there, numb. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel was nowhere to be found. Revenge, it turned out, didn't have a flavor. It was just empty calories for a starving soul. I got up and poured myself a glass of wine, sipping it slowly as I tried to process everything. Somewhere in the house, I could hear the faint creak of the floorboards. Landon moving around, restless as always when he felt cornered. When he came into the kitchen, his expression was unreadable. "You cooked," he said, as if the sight of dinner on the table surprised him. "I did," I replied calmly. "Your favorite, truffle pasta." He stared at me, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Why?" I smiled faintly. "Because it's the last time I'll ever make it." He frowned, but before he could ask more, I turned away. "Alina knows," I said over my shoulder. The silence that followed was heavy enough to drown in. "What?" His voice was a mixture of disbelief and fear. "She knows everything." I told her, or rather, she figured it out. He didn't speak. I could hear his breathing quicken. When I turned back, his face was pale, his eyes darting toward the door like a man calculating escape routes. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "I didn't tell anyone else. Your secret's safe. For now." He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, he grabbed his glass, drained it, and left the room without another word. When I went to bed, the house felt emptier than ever. I lay there listening to the distant hum of traffic, wondering what version of the story he'd tell himself tonight. Maybe he'd frame himself as the victim. Maybe he'd blame me for everything. I didn't care anymore. At some point, I drifted off to sleep, exhausted but strangely calm. When I woke the next morning, the side of the bed beside me was cold. I sat up, eyes scanning the room. His closet door stood open, a gaping mouth of absence. Half his clothes were gone. His suitcase, too. There was no note, no goodbye. Just the faint, lingering smell of cedarwood cologne and the echo of everything that had finally come undone. The days that followed were unlike any I'd ever lived. The house felt suspended in time, like it was holding its breath. Every clock ticked louder. Every empty space seemed to hum with the absence of Landon's voice. His side of the closet was a void. His toothbrush was gone, but the faint indentation it left in the holder mocked me every morning. He hadn't left a note, not a word, not even the courtesy of an ending. For the first 2 days, I didn't move much. I sat at the kitchen table where the confrontation had unfolded, my cup of tea growing cold. I thought of all the times I'd waited for him to come home, all the meals I'd kept warm, all the messages I'd sent that began with, "Where are you?" and ended with, "I love you." This time there was no message to send, and no one to answer. When friends called, I played my role perfectly. I was the concerned wife, the one who didn't understand where her husband had gone. "He's been distant lately," I'd say softly, my voice quivering just enough to sound believable. "I think work just got to him." They comforted me with sympathetic tones and platitudes. "Men go through things. He'll come around. He just needs space." None of them suspected what truly sat beneath my calm. But inside, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was hollow. Even anger had burned itself out, leaving only silence. Alina disappeared too. Her social media went dark. No smiling photos, no check-ins at fancy restaurants, no traces of her existence online. It was as if she'd dissolved into air. For a while, I wondered if she had left town entirely, trying to erase the part of her life that had tasted like stolen happiness. It was almost peaceful, that quiet. I spent my mornings teaching, my afternoons cleaning the house as if wiping away fingerprints from a crime scene, and my evenings staring out the kitchen window, half expecting to see Landon's car pull up, but he never came. The nights were the hardest. The bed felt like a cavern. I'd wake up sometimes thinking I heard footsteps in the hallway, only to realize it was the creak of the house settling. Sleep came in pieces, interrupted by flashes of memory. His laugh, the way he'd hold a wine glass by the stem, the whisper of, "I love you," that I now knew, meant nothing. On the fifth night, there was a knock at the door. It was soft, hesitant, not the confident rap of Landon's hand, but something almost apologetic. I opened it and found Alina standing there. She looked destroyed. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes swollen from crying. The elegant, composed woman I'd once served wine to was gone. She clutched a coat around herself like it was armor, though it couldn't hide how small she seemed. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside without a word. When she entered, she glanced around the kitchen, her gaze falling on the stove, the counter, the empty wine glasses still drying on the rack. I could tell she was replaying that night in her head, the moment she realized the man she loved belonged to the woman standing before her. "I didn't know," she whispered finally, her voice breaking. "He told me you were divorced, that you'd been separated for months." I believed her. I didn't want to, but I did. The sincerity in her voice, the tremor in her hands, the devastation on her face, none of that could be faked. "I believe you," I said quietly. She sank into the chair at the table, burying her face in her hands. "I confronted him after that night," she said between sobs. "I told him I knew the truth. I asked him why he lied to both of us." "What did he say?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "He panicked," she whispered. "He tried to explain, said he didn't mean for it to happen, that he loved us both in different ways. Then he just left." I nodded slowly. That sounded exactly like him. Landon didn't face consequences. He escaped them. "He's a coward," I said softly. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I keep thinking about how stupid I was, how easily I believed him, how I made excuses every time he canceled plans or turned off his phone. "We both did," I said. "We wanted to believe in a version of him that never really existed." We sat there in silence for a long time. No shouting, no accusations, just two women linked by the same betrayal. The air between us wasn't charged with hatred anymore. It was heavy with shared grief. She spoke again after a while, her voice trembling. "You know what hurts the most? He said he loved how genuine I was, how I wasn't fake like other women." She laughed bitterly. And all that time, he was lying to my face. "He used words like they were seasoning," I murmured. "Sprinkled them just enough to make everything taste better." That made her laugh through her tears. It was small, fragile, but real. We talked for hours, unraveling the lies, comparing notes like survivors, piecing together how the fire started. We found comfort in understanding that the deceit had been systematic, practiced. He'd told us both the same lines, mirrored our emotions, made us believe we were each his savior. By the time she left, the sun was rising. Before walking out, she turned to me and said, "Thank you for not hating me." "I did once," I admitted. "But now I just feel sorry, for both of us." She nodded, her expression softening. "I hope you find peace, Isabel." "I will," I said. "You should too." When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long time, watching the lights spill into the kitchen. Something inside me had shifted. The anger that had driven me for weeks had finally loosened its grip. For the first time, I didn't feel rage. I felt pity. And beneath that pity, a faint pulse of something else, something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. In the weeks that followed, the silence became my companion rather than my enemy. The world moved on without Landon, and for the first time, so did I. The kitchen no longer felt haunted. It was mine again. The truffle pasta, once a symbol of love twisted into deceit, began to feel like something else. Like recovery, like rediscovery. I started teaching again with a new sense of purpose. My students noticed it too. "You seem lighter," one of them said after class. I smiled. Maybe I am. Because I'd learned something valuable in all this. That silence can be cleansing. That losing someone who lies isn't loss at all. It's the removal of rot. Still, late at night, when the house was quiet, I would think of all the stories that never got told, the truths buried under charm and manipulation. I realized I didn't want to keep them hidden anymore. I wanted to tell my story, not for revenge, but for release. Not as a victim's confession, but as a survivor's recipe. So one evening, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen, and I began to type, "My name is Isabel, and I once cooked for my husband's mistress without knowing it. This is the story of the meal that changed everything." I didn't expect to rebuild my life through a camera lens. The idea came to me one quiet morning while I was sipping coffee at the same kitchen table where everything had fallen apart. The house no longer felt haunted, it felt empty, but in a liberating way. Silence had stopped feeling like punishment and started to sound like peace. That morning, as the first light spilled across the counter, I opened my laptop and looked at the blank document where I had typed my story weeks before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain whether I should share it or bury it forever. But the truth was, the story wasn't just about Landon or Alina. It was about me. About the version of Isabel who had forgotten that she mattered outside of someone else's love. That was the moment I decided to start The Dish of Truth. At first, it was simple, a YouTube channel where I cooked and talked about what food had taught me about life, heartbreak, and healing. I didn't want it to be about gossip or revenge. I wanted it to be about reclaiming flavor, about rediscovering myself through the very thing that once tethered me to pain. In my first video, I looked into the camera with a calm smile and said, "Welcome to the Dish of Truth. I'm Isabel. Here, every recipe has a story, and every story has something to teach us." I started small, homemade bread and what it means to rise again after being broken, roasted vegetables and the sweetness that comes from patience, and eventually the truffle pasta. The dish that had once symbolized deceit became my signature, not because of its connection to Landon, but because of what it represented, reclaiming power through what once caused pain. I titled that episode, "The Recipe That Taught Me Everything." In the video, I spoke openly, not about names or scandals, but about betrayal, loss, and rediscovery. "This dish used to remind me of someone else," I said as I stirred the sauce. "Now it reminds me of myself, because I finally learned that what I create with love never really belongs to anyone else." The response was overwhelming. At first, only a few people watched, then hundreds, then thousands. Women started writing to me, sharing their own stories of infidelity, self-doubt, and survival. They said my calm, my voice, my words gave them something they hadn't realized they'd lost: hope. A woman from Michigan commented, "Your story made me cook again after my husband left. Thank you for showing me that love for yourself tastes better than any apology." Another wrote, "You made me realize I'm not crazy for staying calm. We don't have to scream to heal." Every message became a small flame, illuminating the corners of my own darkness. I never mentioned Landon by name. I didn't need to. His silence was punishment enough. I knew he'd seen the channel. People who once knew us both had told me he watched from fake accounts, probably expecting a public shaming that never came. But I had no interest in revenge anymore. I had found something much stronger: peace. He had built his identity on control, on keeping narratives tidy. Mine now was gloriously messy, flour-dusted and real. Months passed, and the Dish of Truth became more than a channel. It became a movement. Viewers began sending in their own recipes of truth, dishes they made to mark moments of letting go. A woman in Boston sent me her mother's soup recipe, saying it helped her forgive herself. Another mailed me a handwritten note with a photo of a pie, the caption reading, "For the day I stopped apologizing." I realized then that stories, like recipes, were meant to be shared, not to feed others' curiosity, but to nourish their courage. One afternoon, an email arrived that made me pause. It was from Alina. She had moved away months earlier, started fresh somewhere new. Her message was short, but every word carried weight. Isabel, I just wanted to say thank you. You could have destroyed me, but you didn't. You showed me who he really was. Who I really was, too. I've started cooking again. Not his favorites, mine. I hope one day I can be as brave as you. With gratitude, Alina. I sat at my desk for a long time, rereading it until the words blurred. There was no bitterness left between us, only understanding. She had been another woman lost in the illusion of someone else's promises, and like me, she had finally found her way back to herself. I smiled and replied simply, I'm glad you found your flavor again. That's what life is, a recipe we keep rewriting. And with that, I closed that chapter for good. A year later, I filmed the final episode of the season. I wanted it to be personal. A quiet goodbye to the version of myself who had needed revenge to feel powerful. I dressed the set simply, a white tablecloth, a vase of fresh lilies, and one plate, the same one I'd served Alina that night. It felt poetic, using it again, but this time with peace instead of fury. As the camera rolled, I began cooking the truffle pasta one last time. My hands moved fluidly, instinctively, without pain. This dish used to belong to someone else's story, I said into the microphone, but now it's mine. Every ingredient in it has changed meaning. Salt for strength, butter for softness, truffle for truth, and pasta for patience. The sauce thickened perfectly, creamy and golden. I plated it neatly, the scent filling the kitchen with warmth instead of regret. I looked into the camera, smiled gently, and said, This one's for anyone who's ever mistaken betrayal for the end. It's not. It's just the start of a new recipe. Then I paused, picking up the fork. I twirled the pasta slowly and held it up, letting the light catch the sheen of the sauce. This, I continued softly, is for the woman who cooked for her husband's mistress and found herself in the recipe. I took the bite, letting the familiar flavors settle on my tongue. It didn't taste like heartbreak anymore. It tasted like peace. When I uploaded that video, I didn't check the numbers right away. I didn't need to. I had already found what I was looking for, closure. But days later, the notifications poured in. Thousands of comments, thousands of women and men sharing how the story had touched them. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore, it was about transformation. People began calling me the Truffle Woman online, a symbol of grace in the face of deceit. I found the nickname funny, but also oddly fitting. Truffles, after all, are born underground in darkness, invisible until someone digs deep enough to find them. That's what I'd done, dug through the dark, through the rot and ruin, until I unearthed something rare. Myself. Now when I cook, I don't cook to please. I don't cook to prove anything. I cook to remember that even in the most bitter ingredients, there's potential for sweetness. The past no longer lingers like a ghost. It's simply part of the flavor. And every time I taste that truffle pasta, I smile, not because of what it once meant, but because of what it became, the dish that freed me. In the end, I realized revenge doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers through peace. I didn't need to destroy anyone. I just needed to rebuild myself. The woman who once cooked for her husband's mistress now cooks only for her own soul. And every bite reminds me that healing, too, can taste divine. If this story touched something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Every like helps more women find the strength to take back their own story. Subscribe if you believe that even broken hearts can build beautiful new beginnings. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my place, would you have told her the truth or let her keep tasting the lie?